Hello, my name is Lucian Gaona, and my presentation concerns inappropriate relationships between law enforcement and offenders. Inappropriate relationships between law enforcement and offenders occur frequently. These activities include law enforcement officers using their discretion to allow a potential criminal off the hook for a crime they committed on the outside, doing favors for an offender while incarcerated, such as sneaking in contraband, to sexual conduct with an offender. Once these actions occur, offenders and law enforcement remain tight-lipped about the misconduct of their comrades, respectively. Punishment only sometimes comes swiftly, and the consequences for violations seem minimal at best. Nonetheless, inappropriate relationships need care on a case-by-case basis to protect all parties involved. The following 3 slides refer to a former lieutenant in a narrator's local city conducting gross misconduct on and off duty, the reaction from the police chief regarding the incidents in the public, and the result of the lieutenant's sentencing. The remaining slides refer to sexual misconduct between law enforcement and offenders. The law enforcement in this case will be referred to as corrections officers or COs. Other correctional employees, such as psychiatrists and nurses, must be noted. The offenders will be called inmates and referred to inmates in public and private prisons. The slides will discuss why these relationships occur, the federal statutes in place to discourage these occurring, and recommendations to alleviate the issue. On September 21st, 2022, Lieutenant Tabitha Angelo, her longtime boyfriend and former Sergeant Kenneth Sapolsky, and Officer Jesse Perkins were involved in an altercation that sparked an internal investigation into Lieutenant Angelo's misconduct while on and off duty. Angelo had been confronted after the altercation to hand over her company-issued badge, gun, and cell phone. She had handed the phone over after deleting incriminating evidence of sexual misconduct. She only admitted to what evidence was found in her cell phone and did not cooperate with investigators otherwise. She had been found to have sexual relations with her subordinate, former Officer Carlos Trujillo, a convicted drug dealer, and intended to start an intimate relationship with an unidentified subordinate. She had sexual relations both on and off duty. In one instance, Angelo received a phone call from her quote-unquote sneaky link drug dealer during a traffic stop. Angelo then called the officer involved and urged him to let the quote-unquote sneaky link off the hook. The dealer was stopped for tinted windows. She also provided photo evidence to the link about the arrest of a rival dealer. Angelo also used the Law Enforcement Automated Data System, or LEADS, to run the felon's license plate without legal authority. Upon discovery, all 3 law enforcement agents resigned from the department or were fired approximately 50 days after the Sapolsky-involved incident. Police Chief James McCann stated upon the investigation that a clear message has been sent to the officers of the LPD and to members of the public that such repugnant conduct will not be tolerated at the LPD. I have taken proactive measures to rid the agency of any disgraceful conduct committed by my officers. The LPD will continue to take a zero-tolerance approach for violations stemming from a lack of integrity. We will continue to be transparent and to work hard to maintain and sustain the support of those who trust us to serve and to do the right thing. Angelo was a highly respected individual in the community, so upon news release, the public was shocked to learn about her deeds. Angelo was the first female detective on the force and held to a high standard, having served in the Navy before her 16-year-long career with law enforcement. Angelo faced 20-plus years in prison due to 2 counts of tampering with evidence, 2 counts of tampering with records, 3 counts of unauthorized use of the LEADS database, and 1 count of obstructing official business. However, she was sentenced to 3 months in jail, 2 years of probation, had a $450 as well as a $250 fine, and forfeiture of her Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy certificate, pleading guilty to a felony count of unauthorized use of the LEADS and a misdemeanor count of obstructing official business. She may no longer serve as a law enforcement officer in Ohio. Angelo's case is an unfortunate and standard issue with inappropriate relationships between law enforcement and offenders. Perhaps her sentencing was lenient due to the affairs occurring outside prison walls. However, had she been a female CO, these behaviors would appear worse. Regardless of whether or not an inmate or CO initiates the relationship, both parties do so to establish or maintain control, with neither party fully respecting the other. So why would COs engage in inappropriate relationships to begin with? Well, they may feel they can relate to the oppression of the inmates one way or another. COs are typically underpaid, short-staffed, and feel unappreciated by their supervisors. Second, many inmates and staff are familiar with each other via their interpersonal connections on the outside, such as having similar friends or family members. Perhaps a CO grew up in the same neighborhood or city as the inmate. Some COs get too acquainted with inmates due to spending extended periods with them. It is important to note that not all jail and prison COs spend hands-on time with the inmates, as some COs monitor inmates through cameras for supervision. Some COs are simply unaware they are violating policy and law. COs that witness other COs give inmates special treatment tend not to trust that CO. When COs sneak in drugs or weapons, they create safety risks for the facility, fellow staff, and the inmates they were authorized to protect. Regarding sexual activity, if a CO cannot have access to a willing participant, they may threaten the inmate with punishments such as solitary confinement to control their victim. At times, COs engage in sexual activity with more than one inmate. It is also possible the CO participates in sexual relations with fellow staff to keep their actions hidden from detection and punishment. Finally, COs may inadvertently uncover repressed trauma from a prior sexual experience within the inmate's past, further re-victimizing them or exacerbating their mental health issues otherwise unknown to the CO. If an inmate targets a CO, these COs are those with limited supervision, dangerous working conditions, minimal pay, and personal matters such as in finance or romantic involvement or a lack thereof. Now, why would offenders engage in these inappropriate relationships? Inmates engage in sexual conduct with COs for a few reasons. One is that they can manipulate the CO by forging trust so the CO can bring in outside items the inmate could not otherwise gain, such as gum and cigarettes, to more serious items such as drugs and weapons, to get away with their misconduct in the prison. Inmates may practice their skills until they master the survival tactic and goal to control a CO while incarcerated to gain fellow inmates' respect and take care of their immediate needs. Many inmates will use unconventional tactics, such as masturbating in front of COs to determine which ones they can control quickly, or stage a fight so the CO believes the inmate is protecting them. Inmates are more likely to engage in such behaviors when they face an extended amount of time for their sentence, such as inmates who have to serve 6 or more years for their sentence. Many inmates that are involved with COs are willing participants. Male inmates are more likely to consent to sexual relations with female COs than female inmates with male COs. A Bureau and Justice Statistics report indicated that 84% of the male inmates reporting sexual misconduct were consenting participants. However, it is important to note that consent is not a defense. Note also that same-sex offenses occur between COs and inmates as well. If an inmate is an unwilling participant, they may fear retaliation against them by the CO or face the possibility of not being seen as a credible source. Sexual activity is conducted in secluded areas such as in kitchens, laundry rooms, commissaries, and workshops. Targeted inmates are the ones with drug addiction or other mental health issues, those who are new to the criminal justice system, and those who await deportation, and those who have a history of prostitution. Because there is a power differential between COs and inmates, The inmates in custody, whether it's in a state prison or a private prison, cannot legally consent to sexual activity as stated earlier. Nonetheless, both inmates and staff engage in such sexual acts. When the COs breach the rules most, if not all, prisons have in place due to the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA, they violate the following federal statutes. Codes 2241 and 2242 carry a maximum sentence for an X amount of years. These include aggravated sexual abuse by force, threats of force, such as death, serious injury, kidnapping, or using drugs to impair the victim. If a victim cannot consent due to misunderstanding the proposed conduct or expressing unwillingness to participate, the act is then considered sexual abuse. Code 2243C states, whoever, while acting in their capacity as a federal law enforcement officer, knowingly engages in a sexual act with an individual who is under arrest, under supervision, in detention, or in federal custody, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 15 years, or both. Finally, Code 2244 states, A. Sexual conduct in circumstances where sexual acts are punished by this chapter. Whoever in the special maritime and territorial jurisdiction of the United States or in a federal prison or in any prison, institution, or facility in which persons are held in custody by direction of or pursuant to a contract or agreement with the head of any federal department or agency, knowingly engages in or causes sexual contact with or by another person, if so, would violate 1. Subsection A or B of Section 2241 of this title, had the sexual conduct been a sexual act, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more to 10 years or both. Section 2242 of this title, had the sexual contact been a sexual act, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 3 years or both. And 6, subsection C of Section 2243 of this title, had the sexual conduct been a sexual act, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. According to the Office of the Inspector General, or OIG, most prosecutions of allegations made by inmates about COs are thrown out due to the CO retiring, resigning, or having been terminated from one job and possibly moved to another facility to continue their disruption. The OIG reported this finding in 2005. It is important to note that the narrator did not determine if the widespread issue of prosecution still practices such a lack of justice. The narrator recommends that prosecution be taken regardless of whether or not a CO resigns. In the case discussed earlier, Lieutenant Angelo resigned from her position upon investigation. Improvements must begin with training COs and their supervisors. As mentioned previously, targeted COs have limited supervision, so increased leadership and peer support are needed to discourage sexual deviancy between COs and inmates. Finally, maintaining knowledge and skills of new and veteran COs by providing exams, utilizing frequent employee and supervisor reviews, and encouraging continued training in areas such as ethics, collective efficacy, and boundary setting would be valuable in decreasing the risk of sexual misconduct and otherwise inappropriate relationships. For further reading, please view any one of these references listed below. For this assignment, I used the EBSCOhost web database utilized by Tiffin University and selected databases based on what I thought would be helpful for the search, such as Academic Search Complete, Criminal Justice Abstracts with Full Text, International Political Science Abstracts, and so forth. I made an advanced search for inappropriate relationships and law enforcement or police officers or cops or officers and offenders or criminals or prisoner. I then selected peer-reviewed sources and limited the search from 2018 to 2023. Only one resulting article showed. For a publicized case, I decided to use a local case that had recently been decided regarding a law enforcement superior, her subordinates, and a convicted felon. I used Google Docs to create a script for the presentation and PowerPoint for the creation of the slides. I used Grammarly for error check and flow using the script, then copy-pasted the edited version to the presentation and for the script. The design statement is in my own unedited words.